I'm Lee Kelso. This is Health Call Online, the place for extended versions of interviews heard in our weekly radio broadcast, the Health Call Radio Hour. I'm sure you've heard the phrase 60 is the new 40. Well, what if 90 becomes the new 50? What if you feel like you're 50 years old when you're 90 plus? Can that really happen? Well, yes, says today's guest. And he writes about that in his new book, The Great Age Reboot, Cracking the Longevity Code for a Younger Tomorrow. Let's say hello and welcome to Dr. Michael Roizen. He is the author of this new book, many other New York Times bestsellers as well. He's also the Chief Wellness Officer Emeritus at Cleveland Clinic and a leading voice in rethinking how we age. So glad that you're here. Let's kick things off. Tell me something that's just going to blow my mind about the aging process.
Lee, it's a privilege being here, so thank you. And what blows my mind is that it is likely that you're going to get to live 30 years longer than you expected, but 30 years younger as well. That is, in 1998, when we came out with Real Age, Are You As Young As You Can Be? We said that 60 was likely to be the new 40. We actually took a bunch of criticism for it then, but it's come to pass, and as you can see in the Nurses' Health Study, Cleveland Clinic's own data, etc. Now we expect that 90 will be the new 40 with at least an 80% probability, meaning you're not going to just slow aging, you're going to get to reboot back to a younger age. So think of yourself not as a teenager, but probably as being able to stay between 30 and 50 for a lot longer than you expect.
Wow, that is kind of mind blowing. So that's going to have lots of social impact, lots of changes in how we live beyond just health, and we'll get to that in just a second. One of the things I like about your book, Dr. Mike, is the way that you divided it into kind of three sections. And the first section really takes a look at 14 game changers, health science technologies, and other changes that really are affecting us in aging. And one of them that
Sure.
really caught my attention is this whole idea of brown fat. I don't think a lot of people know about that. Would you explain that and what that could mean?
That's actually Albert Ratner's, one of the co-authors, favorite topic. Um, when you're born, you have brown fat that helps keep you warm. It surrounds your central organs, and we think it's there teleologically from the fact that your mom couldn't swaddle you all the time, so it was there to keep you warm, those vital organs warm, when your mom couldn't be there. Um, it actually increases heat in your body. So it uses calories. It's brown because it has a lot more mitochondria, the energy factories that turn glucose and fat into what we call into heat or into energy. When we get old, that pluripotent fat, which went to brown fat, now can go to white fat. And that white fat obviously is a storage fat, but that causes inflammation, meaning it increases your risk of aging from heart disease, stroke, memory loss, impotence, wrinkles of the skin, even dementia.
And that's the fat
Um,
that we have just
but
all over our body. That's you can pinch an
it's
inch. That's the white fat, right?
That's right. It's hanging off your body, hanging off of your stomach. It's what we call it's all over. But imagine if we could regress that white fat to pluripotent fat and then turn it into brown fat. You'd eliminate obesity, eliminate the complex, if you will, the consequences of obesity, such as you'd eliminate type 2 diabetes, you'd eliminate non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, you'd eliminate much osteoarthritis, much of the heart disease, stroke, memory loss, even much of the cancers that are related, 9 major cancers related to obesity. So you'd eliminate them. So there's a great potential benefit from turning white fat into brown fat. That's been done in 3 animal species, the biggest at Clemson with sheep. Why sheep? Because they can't stop eating either. They develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and stop producing wool as efficiently or at all. So It's been done in 3 animal species. It's now being done with some drugs and cold therapy in humans, but we think you'll be able to do it with, if you will, what we call epigenetic reprogramming, in which case all of us could have it pretty easily. But the cold data and the medication data are accumulating strongly, so maybe you won't even need that. And all of these 14 areas, so that's one of the 14 areas of rebooting that has been shown in at least 2 animal species. All of these are moving into human trials, this one too.
So, walk me back on that a second. How close to commercial application release is this, do you think? Are we talking 20 years out, 5 years? Where is this going to happen?
You know, from the standpoint of using either cold therapy or medications, it's here now. That is, if you spend 11 minutes at 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 11 minutes essentially nude in 60, not with your clothes on, 11 minutes in a cold environment a week, that turns on brown fat. The longer you're in there, we think the more, we don't have the dose response curves, we don't have the timing exactly worked out yet. But science is doing that, and there's some medications that do this as well. I think if you're looking at cold therapy, it's here now. We just need to find the correct dose and time. So that's probably about 4 years away. If you look at the medications, that's probably about 6 or 8 years away. That's about the same time epigenetic reprogramming, maybe 10 years away. But the studies on epigenetic reprogramming have been started in Japan, of all countries, not as an obese country as America, but it is started there because of the rules of therapy and usage.
So you mentioned the epigenome there, and I'm going to take a shot at explaining this. You correct me if I get it wrong. So we have our DNA, and then on sort of on top of the DNA are factors that turn genes on and off, rotate the volume up and down. And so those are the activators of the underlying genes. And so your theory is we're going to be able to make tweaks at that level and change a lot of the factors of our health?
We already do. So you control over 80% of the switches that control your genes. I like to think of genes as protein factories. So genes either direct proteins to be made. We've learned that with the mRNA vaccines. The mRNA vaccines present something to your genes. It produces a protein in response to it. And it is that the genes that produce protein. Whether that gene is on or off is related to a switch. We think those switches are called epigenes. And whether that switch is on or off is largely under your control, at least 80%. In fact, some of the recent data says maybe 93% of the switches are under your control. And let me give you an example. So if I walk, I'm on a treadmill, and if I walk on the treadmill, I stimulate the muscles. That muscle stimulation turns on a gene in the muscle cells that produces a very small protein called a risen. A risen goes across the blood-brain barrier to my brain, and it stimulates another protein, another gene, to turn on to produce brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which is like miracle grow for the brain, which increases the size of my memory center. So why does physical activity increase your memory? Well, it does increase blood flow to the brain. That's a good thing and helps memory, but it also turns on a gene that makes a risen. So we know that physical activity turns on or off more than 50 genes, stress management more than 250. So we're getting to know much more about this, but we think you control over 80% of which of your genes are on or not through your epigene.
So down the road is the thinking that there will be some mechanism by which I can go in and just do a reset on a lot of those genes and move my age backwards?
Exactly. So we think a lot of aging, one of the 14 theories of aging mechanism is that you cause errors in your original epigenetic factory settings, the original settings you had, and that causes aging. Yamanaka, a Japanese scientist, in 2004 won the Nobel Prize for finding the 4 genes that reset that your epigenes back to their original settings. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, their original settings were for growth, and you don't want unrestrained growth. So when you do this in mice, 107-week-old mice, and turn on those 4 genes that Yamanaka discovered, you reset the mouse back to a 40-week-old mouse from a 107-week-old, literally making the organs of the mouse younger, letting the mouse live longer. Unfortunately, a large number of the mice, not more than 50%, but about 30%, get unrestrained growth of one or more cells and develop cancer. So the point is, can you turn on some of those Yamanaka factors, reset it without getting cancer? And 3 groups now, and reproduced by the Google Coleco Age Moonshot group, have reset just the 3 genes, not C. Mike, so they're 4, and they've skipped the 4th, and they reset the mouse to a younger mouse without them developing cancer so far. It's about 32 weeks since they've done that, so they're 70 or 80 human years, 70 or 80 week-old mice now. We don't know whether you can do this repeatedly. Imagine you could do it repeatedly, but if you reset that, the mouse's organs and functioning becomes that of a younger mouse. They even look younger. The skin becomes younger. It increases elastin and collagen production. So but that's just one of the 14 areas, epigenetic reprogramming.
Pretty fascinating to think, though, that I'll go through some sort of a reset process at some point and become the younger me. That's mind blowing. It really is.
Lee, how old are you?
I'm 65.
So imagine yourself as being 40 again in 10 years. So that's what this is about. So the mind-blowing part of the science, which is the first third of the book, as you said, we divided into 3, is what is fascinating, meaning there are 14 areas of aging research, which in at least 2 animal species have rebooted the mouse or the guinea pig or the sheep back to a younger mouse or guinea pig or sheep. Now, we don't know whether this can be done in humans, but a lot of this is moving into humans.
Pretty fascinating. And then lots of social impact from that decision. So if I go back from age 75 to age 40, that means that it's going to change the way I live, right? I'm not possibly going to
Well, that's
need.
the middle part of the book, as you
Right.
said.
Yeah.
It's banking on the great age reboot, because instead of having to worry about pensions, or instead of having to worry about Medicare and Social Security not being adequately funded, if you're going to live 30 years longer in good health, you're going to work 20 years longer, pay into Social Security and Medicare. The compounding effect actually solves the government fiscal problems. It increases tax revenue, it increases Social Security and Medicare trust fund revenue so considerably that it ends up, if we get there fast enough, it ends up eliminating that worry and problem.
And your co-authors also delve into the idea of it's going to change our environment at home. How might our homes be different if we're all healthy later in our lives?
You're going to live 30 years longer in good health, you're not going to leave your home for a retirement community. You're not going to give up your home, which means we're already short of housing in America, and we will get more short, which will also mean we need different homes for seniors. So one of the thought is if you're maybe it's a big family enclave or enclave, if you will, where you'll be with your grandkids and your great grandkids and your great great grandkids, or maybe it is just two of you living in a small apartment that's attached to large central living space where you can have a posse and a group you get together with. So we don't know I mean, there are all kinds of potential changes, but one of which is that if we're living longer, instead of the population not growing very much, as the Congressional Budget Office says, it predicts that from now till 2050, we'll have about a 10% increase in our population, the slowest growth we've had ever since it's been recorded over a 30-year period. We won't. We expect a 35% growth, assuming immigration stays about the same and birth and fertility rates stay about the same. They've been falling but have stabilized now. But assuming those stay the same, then we will have a older, larger population that functions much younger. That changes what we need in housing as well.
Yeah, it sure does. A big family compound makes a lot more sense at that point. Another one of those exciting 14 factors is something that looks like you could use right now. You just told me you are recovering from rotator cuff surgery. So a little stem cell injection could make a big difference there somewhere down the road. Explain to me how important those stem cells could be to us in the future for tissue repair such as you need right now.
Well, first, I've got to tell one of the lessons I learned. Um, I'm 76 and have been lifting literally the same amount of weights and the same um, 15 exercises I do 3 times a week, resistance exercise I do 3 times a week since 1994 when I was trained in them. Well, it turns out one of them is a chest press, and I normally warm up with lighter weights before I do it. I was in a hurry, so I went right to the full weights, and I completely tore 3 of the 4 rotator cuff muscles in my right shoulder and a half tear on the fourth. You could hear it was a horrible sound. So my lesson to everyone is warm up. Don't skip the warm up. The second component is the uh, stem cells. To repair such a thing, you would need someplace between 20 and 40 million stem cells injected at least, as well as growth factors. Now, let me go and drop back a little bit and say most stem cell effects in the US are frauds. That is, they give you growth factors, which may be the healthy thing, but they're giving you 500 to 800, maybe as many as 8,000 stem cells. We really need 20 to 40 million. So you're not getting any effect from the stem cell. What happens and why do we know that stem cells are so important in repair? Well, if you get a heart attack or stroke and you get to the hospital in time, you not only restore blood flow, important to saving some of the marginal cells, but the growth factors released by the dying cells call forth your stem cells, which then come in and over a period of 6 weeks or a little longer, repair that area. But we run out of stem cells. Our own stem cells only duplicate 70 to 140 times what's called the Hayflick limit. So what do you want to do? You would like to take a few of your stem cells, grow them in culture to 20 to 40 million, and give them back to yourself.
Mhm.
That one-off is very expensive. But if, on the other hand, you can knock out the immunogenicity of stem cells and
which
grow
triggers an immune
sheets of them in a
reaction.
mass production way. Then you can give them to anyone, give heart stem cells to anybody who has a heart attack, or brain stem cells to anyone who's had a stroke, or or cartilage ones to anyone. And the key is blocking the immunogenicity. Well, a guy named American scientist named Mike West found the technique for doing that, and it's now in big therapy treatments in Japan again. They're mass producing these stem cells, and the first trial on people with what is called heart failure, giving them heart stem cells, has started using these mass produced immuno incompetent or not causing immunogenicity stem cells.
So in other
So
words,
that's
they're
a
generic and they
promise.
can go into anybody without causing the type of rejection, organ rejection that we see without the need for those anti-rejection medications.
I needed you to help write the book. You say it so clearly. That's right. If it works, first results will probably be in 3 years, and then it'll be 3 years after that. So 7 years before it would become commercially available in the United States. Now, where are they doing this now in large scale? As I said, in Japan, it's a rigorous trial. Um, you can go to Panama, where there are two legitimate stem cell treatment centers that Americans moved there to do this work because the FDA wasn't approving it. I don't know how good the data is from Panama because we just haven't been able to get good, outcome data from there. But we will in Japan within 7 years.
It's going to be revolutionary for anybody with arthritis and joint damage and so many other tissue-related failures. That's going to be significant. Tell me a thing or two about dementia. What's out there in the future that makes, because to me, I mean, Dr. Mike, that to me is the most terrifying condition I'm going to face.
Well, let me give you a how low cost this could be. So at the Gladstone Institute at UC San Francisco, they looked at all, I think it was 1,353 drugs that were approved by the FDA and had become generic already. They looked at all the drugs, and one of the drugs, bumetamide, is a diuretic, $4 a month diuretic. It's largely not used since furosemide came into play, but it is available, and it still is $4 a month. And it blocked the effect in the computer simulation. They then went into cell culture, did the same thing, a 70+% block of the effect. They then went into animal models of Alzheimer's disease, same thing. The mice, 70% reduction in dementia. They then went into a human database, 1.4 million people, looked at those taking Bumex versus those taking other water pills, and also a 3.8 million person database. In both, it blocked 71 and 72% of the risk of dementia compared with people who were taking other water pills. That's now gone into real human trials. So just imagine if giving a water pill that blocks that protein activation by the gene can, in fact, reduce dementia. We know now of 33 things that have been shown in at least 2 studies to decrease your risk of dementia, not including that, but that either slow the risk or can, in fact, grow your hippocampus. I already talked about physical activity turning on the gene arisen, but in fact, doing speed of processing games builds hippocampal size, regenerates neurons in the hippocampus, and increases acetylcholine in the hippocampus. One of the signs, and in the forebrain, the areas of that we see having decreased neurotransmitter acetylcholine in dementia. So we've learned a whole bunch about 32 things. Some of the simple things, smelling 4 different smells. So I love coffee. Smell it in the morning. That's one of the smells.
Huh.
Onions, garlic, rosemary, whatever you like for 4 smells. In animal trials, smelling 4 smells every day decreases your risk of dementia. It's one of the reasons we fear COVID a lot, and that the Spanish flu of the 1917 to 19 was so lethal, it increased the risk of dementia of the Parkinsonian type. And we worry about that with COVID-19 as well, because it affects those same nerves that are the smell nerves of the olfactory system, of your smelling system.
Well, there's the famous peanut butter test for early onset of Alzheimer's, right? If you can't smell a teaspoon of peanut butter an inch away from your nose, that's a warning sign. So it kind of works the other direction. I get it. Um, an inexpensive water pill seems to be preventative if you have the APOE4 gene. What about just general dementia? Will that make a difference? I mean, I also know that those prospective studies have taken a look at metformin, and metformin seems to be protective for dementia.
Yeah, metformin has a little protection against dementia, but we're a little worried about metformin for 3 reasons now. One is the longer you take it, the less effective it is at preventing type 2 diabetes. Two is the longer you take it, in fact, you don't reverse pre-diabetes as well. And the third is if you exercise, it appears to decrease the benefits of exercise. Now, that said, the benefits of metformin on aging were compared to other people in epidemiologic studies who had type 2 diabetes and didn't use metformin. Metformin prolonged life expectancy by 3 to 6 years, and it even increased life expectancy compared to control group. So if you don't exercise and are over the age of, say, 65 or 70, then metformin looks like a pretty good thing at decreasing your risk of further aging, slowing your risk of aging, and maybe dementia. But it just brings having blueberries the other day much more powerful than metformin. So there are other things. Having extra virgin olive oil, a tablespoon and a half, much better at preventing dementia in the type of epidemiologic studies. But and there will be a large study called the TAME trial. Near Bazarol from NYU, I believe, is the one who's leading that. NIH has committed half the funds. He's still recruiting the other half of the funds for it. It's about an $80 million study that he has proposed to look at metformin and its benefits or risks in slowing aging in a normal population. He is a superb researcher, and so we expect to see that data and that study get off the ground.
Another section of your book is things that I can do today to reboot my lifestyle for longevity. I want to walk through those kind of quickly. I like you. You're in northern Midwest. So am I. We hardly see the sun in the winter. That makes vitamin D3 awfully darn important, doesn't it?
Yeah, so if you look at the data from Pittsburgh, which is close to Indiana and close to Ohio in its latitude, by the end of April, and I'll give you the reason for looking at that time, 93% of African American and over 80% of Caucasians were at a level of vitamin D that was considered very worrisome, below 20 nanograms per milliliter. Why is that worrisome? Because that also affects bone as well as cardiovascular health and brain health and immune health. The reason we look in April is after October 15th until about April 15th, the sun doesn't have enough energy north of a line between Los Angeles and Atlanta to convert inactive to active vitamin D. And many of us get our vitamin D through the sun's conversion. So without that, you need to supplement. And by the way, as we get older, we often need more and more as we malabsorb it. So vitamin D is important for us. It is more than a vitamin. It's a signaling hormone in the body, meaning it tells other cells and other genes what to do. It's important, we know, for immune functioning and preventing cancer. And so we think keeping your vitamin D level up is very important. And in Indiana, in Ohio, in Pittsburgh, we don't get enough of it. Obviously, it's over the overall population, over 80% is short of vitamin D at a very worrisome level, judging shortness by the end of April.
You know, your book also revisited something that has been in and out of the news and has been surrounded in controversy, and that is aspirin. Now, you are recommending low dose aspirin, and I was kind of surprised to see that. Revisit that for me because, you know, there have been some studies that say, it's really not all that effective.
It's effective, but some of the other therapies, such as statins, have reduced the need for it. At least that's what the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force said. The real data on that they came up with is it's a individual decision rather than a blanket saying everyone should take it. Let me go over the data. Most of the studies look at intention to treat analysis. What do I mean by that? They compare a group that they've said, you should take aspirin, give a pill that's a white pill with aspirin in it, versus a group that gets a placebo, same looking pill, and then they look at them over time. Mm-hmm. In the group that gets the aspirin, that's supposed to get the aspirin, only 64% of that group over these three major new studies actually took the aspirin. On the other hand, in the group that's not supposed to take the aspirin, as many as 36% took a baby aspirin. They thought it was good. Well, if you use intention to treat analysis, you don't find much difference between the two groups because of the contamination that the volunteers. That's intention to treat. But if you look at what we call on protocol, those who actually were supposed to take the aspirin and took it, those who weren't and didn't take it, it's over a 60% reduction in heart attacks and over a 40% reduction in strokes. Now, they also, so from that standpoint, if you're a legitimate pill taker and are going to take it, then I believe you should be, there's a value for it. Secondly, 70% of the side effects, and by the way, there weren't side effects in these studies, but they imputed the bleeding from other studies. So if you impute that, nobody in the largest studies, the last three studies that the U.S. Preventive Service Task Force used, nobody actually had a bleeding complication that led to an adverse outcome. There were some people who were hospitalized for bleeding, but none of them had a stroke or a heart attack or one of the adverse events from it. And if you take it with a half a glass of warm water or half a glass of coffee, before and after, you reduce the side effects by 70%. If you take it with 2,000 milligrams of bovine colostrum, which helps your intestine prevent leaky gut and prevent bloating, etc., more than a 70% protection against the adverse effects of aspirin. Well, none of the studies the U.S. Preventive Service Task Force looked at had those in it. And the U.S. Preventive Service Task Force, in looking at complications, said, let's impute the worst complications from bleeding. So I think if you look at the data, we go through the references in the study and the argument in the study, and even in a more detailed fashion, we have a app called Reboot Your Age. You can go to the Apple App Store or Google Play Store, Reboot Your Age. It's free for a 10-day trial for everyone. And go to the library, look at aspirin, and you'll see all the data and the analysis there. And that library is available. As I said, there's a recap, which does it in lay terms, and a review, which allows practitioners to click and get anybody to click and get the full studies. But you'll see the data analysis there and why I take a baby aspirin morning and another one in the evening with a half a glass of warm water before and after. And I take bovine colostrum. That's what I think virtually everyone should do who is also at risk. Now, aspirin, in addition to preventing heart attack and stroke, clearly it prevents second heart attack and stroke. And I think in the on-protocol analysis prevents first, but it also prevents 11 different cancers, including breast cancer, including esophageal, gastrointestinal, intestinal, colonic, and rectal cancers, etc. So I'm a fairly strong believer in that. And as you know, one of the complications of the Pfizer vaccine is increased clotting. It's the same complication, if you will, from taking hormone therapy for women and men. So in both of those cases, I believe that baby aspirin helps prevent the complications of those situations. So I'm a strong believer in half a baby aspirin morning and evening.
Half a baby aspirin. So that's typically
No, a
81
baby aspirin.
a
Sorry, a baby
Okay.
aspirin with a half a glass of warm water before and afterwards, and the bovine colostrum morning and evening.
And
The reason morning and evening, by the way, the clotting effect lasts 36 hours, but the anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer effect only lasts about 16 hours from a baby aspirin. So you've got to take it twice a day. That's why that is.
So one of the things that there's some belief that as we age, our mitochondria, the little powerhouses in our cells that create the energy our bodies need, that they become less efficient. There is an interest in people taking either NR or NMN. And I don't know that we need to use scientific names there. People can do the research and look up NR and NMN. What's your thinking on that? Is this something that we know enough about now, or is it a promise for the future?
I'm going to give you the short answer and then the explanation. I think it's a promise for the future. As we age, our amount of NADH, an important process in converting, if you will, fat and glucose into energy, declines. And many think that decline is results in our mitochondria not being as functional, which they think may result in memory problems and muscle problems and overall aging. That's one of the 14 areas is how do we provide mitochondrial energetics. And there's some other ways we go into, such as red light therapy. But let me go in because it bypasses the energy chain to get you more energy. But let me go over the NR. So we know in animal studies and in an aging conference I was at in, I think, 2019, in April of that year, when you asked how many of the aging researchers, this is PhDs in aging research, were taking a precursor to NADH, NR or NMN, it was over 60%. Because in animal studies, not only is it safe, but it is effective at reducing dementia, reducing ataxia, reducing some of the signs of aging. In humans, we've not seen that same benefit, and but it still looks very safe as humans take. In animal studies, at 100 times the dose of humans, it feeds growth of metastatic cancers because they use the energy to grow the cancer. But we don't take 100 times that amount. It would, if you said it costs $40 a month, 100 times that month would be you'd spend $4,000, sorry, a month on NAD. No one's going to spend $48,000 a year on something that we don't have full proof. We don't have any proof in humans that it's a benefit. We have a lot of proof that at the doses humans take, there doesn't appear to be any short term or intermediate term toxicity. And we do know that animal studies show it to be effective at increasing the mitochondrial energetics. Um, Now, what do you feel when you take it? Well, I took it for a while. I didn't feel any change, no increased energy, etc., no toxicity either. But I now feel that it isn't ready for prime time. I'm waiting for a few more study points in humans.
Well, there are so many things I'd love to keep you around and talk about. Maybe we can connect again in the future. But before I let you go today, I love to ask guys like you, tell me about your life. How, with everything you've observed, what's your daily routine? How do you live differently? We know you exercise 3 times a week. I'm confident you don't smoke. I'll bet you manage your alcohol intake pretty carefully. Beyond that, how do you live differently?
There are about 180 choices you can make that we now know change your rate of aging in a systematic way. I do almost, you don't have to be perfect, but you have to be pretty darn good. I am pretty darn good at almost everyone. Now, I have too much stress. I have a posse and a purpose. Yesterday on weekends, I call usually 8 or 10 friends in a routine fashion to talk to them. So that's part of my posse. I have a purpose, and I want to thank you, Lee, for letting me share that, which is helping other people live younger for longer. So that's my purpose. I play an awful lot, so I'm a avid Cavs fan. So I watched the Cavaliers play the Pacers Friday night, and I'm going to um, go to the Cavaliers game again tonight. So I enjoy that. I used to before I did my shoulder, I used to play a lot of a game called squash, and we'll get back to that someday as well. But in any case, posse, purpose, and play are key. But I do almost everyone. I do the brain games. I don't eat simple sugars. I try and manage stress. I get sleep appropriately by always waking up at the same time every day. That's more important than going to bed at the same time, it turns out in the sleep studies. To always wake up at the same time every day. I do the supplements that have been shown. There are about 15 supplements that have been shown to make a difference in how long and well you live. Supplements are small molecules. The baby aspirin twice a day is one of those. So, in fact, I try and do almost everything because it's pretty easy. This is sunshine. It is, in fact, what do I do that I love that loves me back? I love salmon, so I have salmon burgers frequently at lunch. I love spinach and mushrooms, so I have those at lunch also. So I do, if you will, intermittent fasting almost every day, and then 5 days a month I go to a 750 calorie soup diet. So I do almost everything that I can to keep healthy. And again, the keys are remembering your choices do matter. And so it isn't, you can't kiss it off. Your choices do matter. They matter to which of your genes are on or not. And it's pretty easy. It's not castor oil. It is doing things you love to do and that love you back. You may not like walking the way I do, but you can play with your grandkids or play ping pong or play badminton or whatever thing, or garden. Whatever you do to get the step equivalence of 10,000 steps a day gets you half of the total benefit of physical activity. So there are whole bunches of things we have in both the Great Age Reboot book and on that app, Reboot Your Age, that you can get at the Apple or Google stores, that go through each of the 180 things, and you get to pick which ones you want to do in what order, and you build up, and pretty soon you're doing a lot of them as I am, and feeling a lot younger.
Fantastic. Really enjoyed the time I spent with you today. I hope people will bounce out to thegreatagereboot.com. There you can order the book. You'll also find a way to get the app, and you'll learn a lot more if you do pick up this book. It's an enjoyable read filled with lots of good, solid technical information, but presented in a very consumable way. It gets my hearty recommendation. Dr. Rosen, thank you so much.
Lee, you are a real pro. I mean, I've been interviewed by a lot of people, and I don't know anyone who's known as much about aging as you have. So thank you very much. It's been a privilege.